adopt the agenda, I'd like to just make a motion that we move public comment, number 6, public comment, to number, I guess, does make a difference, after the approval of minutes,
Just for the record, would you like to do it twice or just once?
So on my agenda, we can do it twice. We can make sure that people have plenty of opportunity to make public comment at that point, and at the end of the meeting, I'll ask again if there are any public comments.
So you want to add an additional public comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Second. All in favor? Thank you. And so with that, we have approval of the minutes, the regular minutes. All in favor? Raise your right hand. Thank you. And if there is anyone here with us today who would like to make any public comments, not related to the agenda items, now's an opportunity to do that. And not seeing any, we can move on, but I do want to make sure that our meetings provide that opportunity. So anyone listening or has anything they want to say in the future, we will have an opportunity for public comment on non-agenda items prior to beginning new business.
Ms. Becker?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, Mr. Williams, would you like to speak at this portion? Okay.
And then I'm going to also, because this is Community Service and Public Safety Committee, make a general public service announcement. Myself, like many people on our island, have found that overnight our cars are being broken into. Mine was last night. And so please keep your cars locked. Please do not leave valuables or guns in your cars. And if that should happen to you, please notify. If you want to notify me, please notify me so I can know. But please make sure that you call and make a report and get a case number so we can track what's happening on our island and do something about it, hopefully soon. All right, and with that, new business. Consideration of a resolution adopting Home Matters, Town of Hilton Head Island Displacement Mitigation Support Plan. Missy Lewick, who is our Director of Planning, will join us for a presentation.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I am here to talk about our displacement mitigation support plan. This is a project that was identified in the town's strategic action plan in strategy number 2, implement the workforce housing framework. Last year at Town Council's strategic action plan, town staff were directed to create a displacement mitigation and support plan. So the memo outlines a broad overview of what the displacement mitigation support plan functions are. The plan in a nutshell is a community-led initiative that provides support services to individuals and families that are facing displacement on Hilton Head Island. It assembles a team called the Community Response Team that's led by some lead agencies as well as an additional roster of support agencies as well. And so it is, I like to think about it as, like use a sports analogy, that it's like we created the team and the roster and the playbook. And we ran some scenario planning through some workshops that we held with some of these agencies to come up with the range of scenarios that we could be faced with and then what resources or needs would be required to support those individuals or families facing displacement. Also, a displacement support plan is similar to emergency response planning or disaster response planning. It's always good to have a plan when you need to activate a plan. And this plan is very similar to that type of scenario planning. Again, it is all community-led and community-driven. And it's important because a lot of these agencies, they already exist. All of these resources that are available to individuals and families exist, but without a coordinated effort, those individuals or families have to navigate on their own and try to assemble those support services that may be required. This creates a playbook, and those support services can be accessed in a more coordinated manner with this particular plan in place. The town's role overall is to both, we assembled the team, we had those scenario planning meetings, we worked with our Housing Action Committee and a work group of the Housing Action Committee on making sure that we've thought about various scenarios that could occur, and then what kind of activation could be put in place that would be necessary to support those that are facing displacement. And I think too, if you think about what this plan is, and most of us have moved at some point in our lives, maybe have moved many times, moving in and of itself is challenging. You have to pack up every single belonging that you own, throw it in a van or a truck or the trunk of your car, and move from A to B. And where it is more difficult is when that happens unexpectedly, and in populations maybe who don't have the resources to navigate both a crisis situation and navigating, where they're going to land. Individuals may have families, may have school-aged children, may be elderly, and so this plan puts into place a support network or a web of resources that could be activated to assist them. We understand too that sometimes individuals, when met with a displacement that happens in a short time period, that difficult decisions are made where, when you have to figure out, I need a security deposit, for example, maybe there's a decision made to get a high interest loan or one of those advanced paycheck loans, or sell an asset like a vehicle, and then down the road, then it's difficult then to get to work. So those are the kinds of decisions sometimes that individuals are faced with when they're trying to figure out how to navigate, how to get into another home when they're facing a displacement event. So ultimately, that is a little bit of an overview of what the plan is. And in a nutshell, the plan, again, creates a community response team led by some partners. Deep Well is the lead partner, so they're the activation agency that then assembles the team that's, again, customized or unique to the needs of those that are being displaced. There also are some financial partners, both the United Way of the Lowcountry and the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry. There's a private fund that is available to assist those agencies that are providing the support services. The funding that is part of this project is all privately held and privately activated. And then we worked through a number of scenario planning exercises through the production of creating this plan. We've had some displacement events, both with Chimney Cove back in 2022, which was the impetus for the Finding Home Workforce Housing Framework Plan to be developed and activated. And then, more recently, there are other displacement events, and the difference between having this plan even drafted in its draft format is that Deep Well, as an agency, has had a support network to activate when they're assisting families now that was not in place when Chimney Cove occurred in 2022. Displacement events can come in a range of reasons, and we really want to emphasize that the plan works best when there's early intervention or when it's known that there could be a displacement as soon as possible. Time is of the essence, especially if that move-out date or scenario is a shorter window. And so We do know through our development review program, we receive pre-application requests typically when a property is thinking about redeveloping, and that is an early sign that, that we can activate and learn a little bit more about, you know, who may be living in those developments, and are they individuals that may be able to utilize some services that are contemplated within this plan. There are, again, roles and responsibilities that I've provided a high-level overview of, both the role of the town of Hilton Head and those lead partner roles and responsibilities. Primarily, the town's chief housing officer, Quincy White, who's here in the audience, is the agent within the town that would activate the displacement plan, and when we're made aware of a possible event. And then it really gets handed off to Deep Well and the other lead agencies and support agencies to handle whatever support functions may be necessary. This particular plan was reviewed many times by our Housing Action Committee. You can see all of those meetings that we held, in addition to some working groups and other meetings that occurred to put the plan together. In December, Housing Action Committee voted 10-0 to recommend this plan to town council. And then we re-reviewed the plan in February. And again, Housing Action Committee voted 7-0 to recommend this plan with some slight adjustments that were related to the funding mechanism. That is an overview of the displacement mitigation support plan. The plan itself is just a 10-page document, also goes through that structure. The one page that I wanted to show you there was the community response team, and this chart here that identifies the lead partner, those lead agencies with the Community Foundation of the Low Country and United Way, and then the community response team and the buckets of possible services that could be provided with those team members. Housing providers, real estate professionals, employment services, faith-based coalition, social service agencies, education stakeholders, and legal services. And there are a number of other potential support agencies that could be activated depending on the needs of the unique situation that is presented. Overall, that is a brief summary of what the plan is. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you for that presentation. My understanding is, from what you said, is that funding for this will be from private sources, either through the Community Foundation, United Way. And in terms of finding other places for people who have been displaced, that's going to be the responsibility of Deep Well through real estate professionals?
So just like when anyone is seeking additional housing, no matter where you are in your income bracket, it's based on the availability of housing when you're looking. And this is no different. So yes, Deep Well does have a housing resource list. And they keep an updated list of apartments and condos that are on Hilton Head and Bluffton that are in more affordable price ranges. So they have that list. It includes property names and landlord contact information, property management firms as well. So they do have that list. And yes, there are limited, options that are available at the time when someone needs to be rehomed. And again, it's really no different at any price point. It is a challenge to find housing here on Hilton Head. But there is a network of resources that are already identified. And then if there are opportunities potentially for additional resources, say it's off-season and there may be short-term rental landlords that it's not the summer season and may have some vacancies for temporary placement. Those are some additional resources that can be brought to the table should that scenario present itself.
It appears, initially anyway, that the role and responsibility of the town in this project is quite limited, communicating information. Am I not correct in terms of that statement, that it's relatively limited, its information transmission?
That's correct. It is relatively limited. It is, obviously, the town has put together the resources to plan and scenario plan, assemble the team. And yes, it is more of a, okay, we're facing an event and we can, find some information out that is voluntarily given, both through a voluntary questionnaire that could be delivered to that landowner or developer, and give that information to Deep Well to use as information to assist with that displacement service. But yes, our role is relatively limited in this entire plan.
Thank you.
Your documents are contrary to a little bit of that. It seems that you put the town right in the middle of responsible action. I don't know if it's meant to be that, was not meant to be that way. Because I see it as a business decision of whatever's happening. The developer or the initial touch is going to be with the town of Hilton Head. Everyone knows, you're going to come in and you're going to discuss what's going on, and that's how the town's going to find out a displacement's coming, right? But the developer themselves know that that's happening prior to us knowing that's happening. So how do we put that responsibility back on that developer and not make it the responsibility of the town of Hilton Head?
That's a good question. Certainly, development, redevelopment is a property right. And some properties, it may be time for those properties to redevelop. So we want to make sure that we're both facilitating their property right to seek redevelopment, but also this plan is really to provide a support network for those that may be displaced because of that activity. So again, participation in even that voluntary displacement questionnaire is voluntary. It is not a requirement that a property owner or applicant provide or share that information about their tenant list. But it is encouraged, but again, it's a balance between both sides of it. I think, having a network that is stood up here to provide that support, and then also, working with a property owner on their development needs.
So you're saying it's an housing action committee and all their entities that would handle this. So all the town's going to do is supply a questionnaire.
The town will provide a questionnaire, correct? And we'll also, provide whatever information that we learn to Deep Well, who then will assemble, again, a unique response based on the needs of those particular tenants.
But how would you learn that information? Give to Deep Well.
By either getting that questionnaire filled out, we could call and they could voluntarily give it to us, but yes, we would just pass that along.
So that's my point. So the questionnaire is coming back to the town, not to the housing committee.
It's coming back to the town, and then we submit it to the lead agency, which is Deep Well.
So basically no staff time involved.
Really just a conduit to distribute that information, and that it is an aid in that assistance that they may be providing, yes.
So, well, before I jump in, although I do want to follow up on that, there is more involvement by the town than simply providing a voluntary questionnaire along with a pre-application application and meeting. There's a lot of town involvement. We have a number of staff people who are involved regularly, routinely on this matter, which is a resource that could be counted in, not only just physical time, but financially. We have yourself, we have Quincy, we have other staff members, and now because the group has chosen to have their discussions outside of the purview of being able to have town involvement with community members, there are subcommittees that have been developed and staff that's assigned to each one of those subcommittees. So in terms of staff and involvement, there's considerable amount. And the cost to the town is also considerable with regard to fund dollars. Furthermore, within the document, it speaks to communication efforts, and we know that the committee and the document references creation of a campaign, a communications campaign. So there are other departments outside of community planning that are also involved. So the staff involvement is significant, and it's all outlined here in this particular document. And I think what I find about that is very open-ended. Through the pre-application process on page 4, early identification of development or redevelopment that could potentially lead to a displacement of residents will be possible. And other anecdotal information gathered through school systems or word of mouth within communities can further provide early warning signs of displacement pressures, supplementing formal processes with valuable on-the-ground insight that will be communicated to community partners for early intervention and support services. And while all of that is outlined, it's not specifically addressed as to who is involved in such things like that. And then it goes on and talks about, as I mentioned, the communication efforts, et cetera, the marketing to the various communities. And so I just wanted to address that. And I do have other comments, but because that was part of the conversation, I think it was the appropriate time to say clearly, this is not simply the town activating based on a pre-application questionnaire. And the pre-application questionnaire, for me, is part of another conversation, but I do want to say that those 29 questions are rather invasive. And while I see that it says voluntary on it, if I were handed that as a developer coming in to redevelop or just to begin something, I would step back and question, how involved am I going to have to get into all of these types of things that are on this questionnaire? And I'll just read one of them. I'll just read one of them as a highlight, but there are several that for me would raise a red flag if I was trying to do business with the town of Hilton Head Island. How will the property owner or authorized representative ensure that the relocation process adheres to all relevant legal requirements and regulations governing tenant rights and protections? Well, that's an awful lot to ask of somebody who's coming in and looking to redevelop based on their own property rights, a piece of land. So just leaving that aside, I don't want to end up doing more harm than good. We know that when Chimney Cove happened in 2022, there was a large outcry, and it was well handled and appropriately handled, and I guess some may say even successfully handled by the nonprofits, and congratulations to them. We on Hilton Head, we all know, are second to none with the work that the nonprofits do, and we're blessed to have them, and we value them. But it was well handled. And in the end, that developer, to my point with regard to the questionnaire, felt some pressure and backed off and didn't do anything with that property. So successful, yes, no one was really displaced, and those folks still exist. But the person who had property rights was that's the word that's coming to mind, is not the right word, but was intimidated enough to step back and say they weren't going to do anything with their property. In the long run, I'm not sure that's the best interest of everyone. But be that as it may, that was the outcome. And it was handled well by the nonprofits without the town's involvement, without any resources being allocated. And I congratulate you. So having said that, I want to also acknowledge that within the room, we have 2 other council members who have joined us this morning. Councilman Brown and Hunter are with us. And I would like to invite you to join the conversation at this time and add your comments before I continue and bring it back to the dais. So either Councilman Hunter or Councilman Brown, if you'd like to comment, we welcome you.
We can share up here. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments. There are a lot of things that I do like about this process. I love that it is a community-led process. I love that the community was engaged in the process of outlining what needs to be done, and that we've identified wonderful partner agencies within our community to help us with this work. I also like the idea of a coordinated process. I have some experience with a nonprofit in my work in Illinois, and I love their business model where the nonprofits would help to coordinate all the resources and be the touch point for individuals when they had needs. And I think that's a business model that works very well. So my question is, moving forward, what is the town's role in the process? And when I look at the process itself for this, this program, Deep Well is listed as the lead agency. Deep Well has a lot of experience. I've personally had the opportunity to see what that looks like when I had a constituent request regarding housing, and they did an excellent job of providing resources and information for that constituent. And so it makes me wonder if Deep Well should be the lead on the entire process, as they're going to be coordinating the resources, as opposed to the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tunner. Councilman Brown, would you like to join the conversation?
I don't have any questions, just 2 points of consideration for the committee. I sort of view this as balance and preparation. We're in a situation where Hilton Head, it may not be unique than other communities, but we're going to have displacement happening. I mean, it's just a fact. With the amount of inventory that we have that needs to be redeveloped, it's going to happen. And I think this is an effort that will balance folks' property rights, because people should be able to do what they want to do with their property, redevelop it, sell it, whatever the case may be. So we're protecting their interest, but we're also protecting the interests of the folks that are living here, working here, and have been a part of our community. The town has, the way I read this, very limited role in this, although in most cases, when there's a redevelopment, the property owners come into the town first. So most times, we know first. We will know before Deep Well knows, and we'll probably know before the tenants know. So again, I just want to sort of focus on balance here when it comes to that, okay? And the second thing, we all know that Chimney Cove was a case study that got the attention of a lot of folks here on Hilton Head, and I'd even say nationally to a degree. We approached that without a plan. We scrambled. Yes, things did get pulled together fairly quickly, but we did not have a plan. I think this is simply an effort to have a plan in place. This community has been known for having solid plans to avoid crises. And I see this no different. So again, I think the staff and the committee have done a really good job getting it to this point. And if we need to tighten screws on anything, I think we should be very direct with what those screws are. But at the end of the day, we don't know when the next event is going to happen. It could happen tomorrow. Let it not happen with us not having a plan. Those are my statements. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, and so bringing it back to our committee.
Yeah, I agree. We need to be very direct, very direct. I think verbiage needs to be changed. I think we need to make it very, very clear that this in no way, 100%, in no way would hinder development agreement as being part of a redevelopment. It's because you have a displacement situation going on. I think that's two different animals. Of course, we want to see both of them succeed, but they should never cross. To put it any different way, there are a lot of hoops to jump through in this community to get any kind of redevelopment or redevelopment of a blighted area through for reconstruction, and this shouldn't be another hoop to have to climb through. But it's very important. So, because it's going to happen time to time, and it's more of a business relationship, personal relationship with the renters. I'm sure they have month-to-month, 6-month, 1-month leases that have to be abided by. So that's not for the town to get involved in, or we end up getting involved in legally. That's not a place I think we should be. I do understand, and I think that since we are the first touch, that we should have this questionnaire. If it were me looking at this questionnaire and it's voluntarily submitted, it wouldn't be submitted. As the developer, although it's voluntary, it's tying their hands in a way, saying, once they answer some of these questions, you kind of set the tone of where they stand and how they feel about things. And again, I think it blends with their development agreement and the work they're doing with the town and the staff on this side, with this side. So I would hope that this would be filled out and turned over to someone else, not to the town. I don't see the town getting this back, because I think it would only convolute the issue. I think it could be detrimental on both sides, because there are a lot of opinions, and we have agencies and organizations set up to take care, that the community does, not the town, to take care of situations like this, and we should lean on them. And developer that comes in to do this, should they decide to, they should lean on them. And the community leader in that development or complex should lean on them. And that's where it should start. Of course, the town can help as much as possible, but I don't think the town needs to get deeply involved into housing and displacement.
Anything that you wanted to add? Thank you, Steve. Steve A. Steve A. It's time for discussion, because I've got more than what I want to make sure that we've covered, but.
Those of us who were involved in 2022, at the time the Chimney Cove situation arose, were very upset and concerned that a very large number of people all at once would be thrown out of their residence. Most of those people were very modest income, many Hispanics, but they were our workforce in a large regard. And the town had as a principal objective then, as it still does now, to enhance our situation with regard to workforce availability. And this effort at dealing with displacement mitigation, in my mind, is directly related to our efforts to deal with workforce availability. I think it is widely recognized that it is highly important for the private sector, the agencies mentioned here, to be significantly involved. And I think staff has done an excellent job of drawing a fine line between what the public involvement by the town would be and what the private involvement by the leading private agencies would be. And as I read the situation, the town is a facilitator here, basically. It'd be transmitting information. Yes, the town has, in terms of staff time, provided a lot of time up till now through the Housing Committee. But this plan going forward does not impose much in the way of burdens on town staff. There is no town funding involved here. We are not involved with trying to find houses or any particular people. So it's a facilitation effort, in my mind, that furthers our overall objective of trying to enhance our workforce availability situation.
Thank you, Steve. And to that point, with regard to the identification of displacement effectiveness or events, I guess, there are other events that are included in the document. Other events include economic shifts, such as rising housing costs or job losses, which can force residents to seek alternative housing options outside their current communities. And then it goes on to discuss natural disasters, hurricanes, flood. That could also create a displacement event. So it's not just the questionnaire that an applicant might fill in. It's other events. And the problem that I have, and I'm happy to go through each of them, but I want everyone to understand that the problem I have is that this is a document with a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of open-ended expectations, and potentially significant obligations for the town. And that's where I am concerned. It's those that are likely to be imposed on the town in the future, not the good work that the nonprofits are doing, who I believe should be the lead agency and should be the ones who own this document in their lead at Deepwell, who they've identified, that they should own this document, that this document should not have the town's logo on it or anything else. Our involvement is truly just to ask, as a voluntary matter, someone coming in for a pre-application, what their thoughts are on these 29 questions. And once it's completed, it should be handed off to one of the lead agencies, who's identified at this point as Deepwell, and that they should take it from there. Otherwise, it is town involvement. And it has been long said by many from the very top of this town that we are not in the housing business. And every single time we do something like this, we become more of a social service network and less of a government agency dealing with public safety and the like. And so this puts us squarely in the housing business. And I cannot go along with that. I can support the idea of a voluntary displacement support questionnaire, even though I believe, quite frankly, that it is detrimental to our town because redevelopers and people who want to make town a better place are going to look at this and never want to jump through these hoops. There's no disclaimer on here. In fact, the voluntary questionnaire is to be completed by the property owner or authorized representative. I don't know what that means. We haven't identified, is this in a single family home where somebody's being displaced, kind of in your suggestion in the beginning of your comments, that everybody's moved and been displaced and had to renegotiate their surroundings? Or is this for a complex of 10 units? Or is this, what size? What is this for? But there's no definition here or no nothing, no parameters that are here. There's no disclaimer. It's simply voluntary. I would put a disclaimer, a significant disclaimer, so that those folks coming in understand that their pre-application or their application will not be adversely considered if they do not complete this, or they do complete it and they complete it in a way that raises red flags or questions or concerns, that they are not obligated in any way, shape, or form to mitigate any of the types of situations that may come out of any of these, unless it's under a legal purview that's outside the realm of the town flicking a switch on that for themselves. That they don't have to go out and do a full survey, that do the tenants work on the island? I mean, how many people know all of these? Do the tenants work on the island? I mean, I don't see a question on here, are all your tenants legally working on the island? And there's questions regarding to that, and I don't see that addressed. What is the timeline? Property owners, authorization representatives willing to host a tenant. There's no disclaimer, and there's no parameters, and there's no restriction that tells folks, if you don't handle this, if you chose not to fill this out, or you don't handle it the way we perceive you handling it, you're safe from your application not being viewed in a negative way. Developers don't want that. And the business of the town is important that we do things so that we help each other, not hurt each other. And while we're trying to help one, in my opinion, this hurts others. So there's that. I'm also very concerned about funding. I keep hearing this funding issue, that the town is not providing any funding, that the funding will go through the Low Country Foundation, and as I believe the fiscal agent, I may have gotten this backwards, and yes, United Way, thank you, will be the lead agency on the funding. But I have questions as to what is the percentage of any funds that they may receive are they taking for their administrative costs? And I'd like to see that information. There's nothing within this document that gives me any idea of what their costs are back to the town and how they're raising those funds, what those efforts look like. I do know, and I'm not happy with the way this is titled, I'll tell you, that the fund at the Low Country Foundation is titled the Hilton Head Island Displacement Fund. It is a displacement fund. If it's going to say Hilton Head Island Displacement Fund, I want to see some documents within that fund that tells me that every single dollar that's raised is going to be used for someone on Hilton Head to stay on Hilton Head. And then where on Hilton Head are they going to stay? I've heard conversations, having sat in on the Housing Action Committee, that there's an effort to try to contract with a variety of different property owners to secure those, their units for the just-in-case scenario. And where are those funds coming from? Because that's going to cost money. I've also heard in the last conversation, multiple conversations, but in the last meeting, having reviewed it, that there's an interest in the Housing Action Committee tapping into funds that we are receiving as a partial settlement. And those are town funds. So when I'm told that no town funds are being held, the Housing Action Committee, who supports and wrote this document, are looking for town funds. Almost every time there's a meeting, they're looking for town funds. So this document opens the door for not only the resources from the town with regard to staff time, et cetera, but also for funding. And so that is problematic. Community stakeholders, it's interesting to me as I read those displacement events years ago. I started my first job within the university system working as a workforce investment act under the Department of Labor. And we would write grants helping people who were displaced from their jobs to get or people who were underemployed to get the skills to become more employed. That program, which was started in 1998, has now been renamed as of 2024. I think it's the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act or something along those lines, but it basically does the same thing. Those are places and those are resources that I believe other agencies should be helping out with too. And I don't see them or see anyone within that realm as a community stakeholder. In fact, I notice there are several community stakeholders that might be missing. And so I wonder about the focus of the effort here. And while Councilman Brown was correct, there was a scramble when Chimney Cove came up. That scramble went pretty well, and it was efficient. And that is the plan that the nonprofits put in place that worked well and should be the model for moving forward. This dragging the town government into housing should not be part of that plan. So I have lots of questions, and I don't see a lot of answers. On page 7, which is the last page, there are a couple of statements written throughout this document. It's open-ended. It's a living document. And it goes on to say that it talks about, and this isn't displacement, but the conclusion drags us further along getting into that housing business than that I've heard, that this town is not interested in going. And so, rising costs and limited availability creates significant challenges to local families. So now we're drawing in a whole nother thing. Plan unites the town and various community partners, vital support and solutions. The town's workforce housing framework guides much of the effort, focuses on developing more accessible housing solutions, ensuring displaced residents have access to attainable and sustainable housing options. The plan is designed to adapt to changing needs and circumstances, and it's not just a static response, but an ongoing effort to support residents facing housing challenges. So it begins to draw in far more than a displacement plan. And you can see where this document takes you. So the language throughout the document is not tight, should not be part of the town's responsibility. As I've heard here, statements that we're only the notifier through a simple pre-application questionnaire. This document does not say that in any way, shape, or form. I've heard throughout this meeting that the town's not funding this. I still have the questions with regard to where that funding is coming from, what it's going to cost us, or costs in the long run to administrate it. And then I hear the conversations through the Housing Action Committee asking for town money. So this document opens the pathway to a place that I'm hearing we're not going, but yet you want us to agree to go to. Who wrote the document?
The document, we had some support from a housing consultant, and then it was also written in-house.
So a housing consultant from what housing consultant? Which housing consultant?
It was Tammy Hoy Hawkins with Together Consulting.
Okay. And so staff, along with the consultant, wrote the document?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, gentlemen?
With whose input? Where'd the input come from?
The input came both from staff, from the Housing Action Committee, and through the scenario planning with the community partners and the community response team members, yes.
Hello, Sean. You've joined us.
Good morning. If I could, for a moment.
Sure.
Again, Sean Lanier, Assistant Town Manager. I just want to bring us back to why we're all here. There's been a lot of conversation about why we're what are we doing with housing? What are our goals? What are our objectives? And what have we been told to do? There's a couple of key documents that we can point back to understand why we have a chief housing officer, why we have a housing fund, why we have a housing action committee. It goes back to 2019 when we adopted a strategic workforce housing plan. That was then updated in 2022 with this finding home document that was adopted by town council. As Ms. Lewick noted in her staff report, as part of our 2024 action plan, we were directed to do certain things related to housing, related to a whole lot of other topics. One of those things was to develop this displacement mitigation support plan. So our role in housing is defined by this document, all those supporting documents that have come before it and exist still today. Our intention is not go any farther beyond that, but rather just within the four corners of these documents. When it comes to the housing, the displacement plan that's in front of you today, yes, there is some language that is loose because as Mrs. Lewick has shared, displacement could come in a lot of different forms. Typically, when we think about it from a town staff, and particularly from a planning department standpoint, it is from when there is a redevelopment that's going to take place. But displacement can happen with a fire. Displacement can happen with a storm. Displacement can happen from a whole host of other areas, and those are outlined in that report or in the document. When that happens, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to how we're going to address to each situation. There's a general playbook, which is what this document intends to set out about how we're going to respond, but it's really on to, once the town is made aware and the town informs those lead agency in Deepwell, it's really up to them to then figure out who do they need to activate and how do they activate their resources, whether that's other agencies that can provide physical, whether that's social services, or whether that's financing. When it comes to financing, yes, there are a lot of questions about, well, where is the funding coming from? But again, true to what our position was in developing this document, that's not on the town to provide the financing. It's not on the town to understand, well, who contributed to the fund, how much of the percentage, if there is a percentage being taken for administration of the fund. That's up for the partner organizations to figure out how they're going to develop and organize and finance this operation once it's aware. Our goal was simply to make sure that we were all organized together as a community and that there was information sharing. That's really what the town's role was, is how do we information share and notify each other and to support a displacement event. So that's why we're all here today, and that's generally what this document is about. I understand there's some questions about the voluntary questionnaire, whether or not that should be a town role, whether or not we just let that live outside the town process, and that becomes something that perhaps that Deepwell shares with the developer, the landowner, once they're made aware of an event. But big picture, that's why we're here, and that's where our direction was.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. I think that actually what we're here is to say whether or not we agree to a document that takes us further down a road that we've agreed that we're not going. And so while Finding Home was created back in response to the Chimney Cove incident, which seems to be the only major incident that we've had, we've now taken it into a document that is open-ended and doesn't increase the chance that the town becomes more, takes another foot down the road, and there is no limitations on much of anything. The language isn't clear, the funding isn't clear, and I've sat in the meetings hearing what the committee's desire is with funding. It's repeated every single time that it's at least public. In the small committee meetings, we don't know what happens. And I'm very displeased that that was the action that was taken when we finally got some transparency to the committee. So having said that, I'm going to suggest that one of two things. We either deny this in whole, because I do not believe this is a document that we should have. I believe this is a document that should be owned and live with the lead agency.
It's my fear that, don't use the word fear, I guess, but it's my thought that if the town adopts this document, and it lives with the town. And it's gonna live with the town for years. And the next council can get inside any document and recreate that document. The best thing to do is to not have the document, not adopt the document. And like Becker said, this should live in a different area with the assistance of the town rather than part of the town, in my opinion. I mean, we can facilitate anything, but I think we should stay far and clear from this.
Would you like to make a motion?
I don't know what that motion would look like, but, well, I would suggest, I'd like to make a motion that we deny adopting this document at this time. Spend a little more time with a couple staff members and people in the community to see where we can agree to allow this document to live, if that makes sense.
Is there a second? Steve? Double over to you, and I'll second the motion. All right, and with that, is there any public comment? Is anyone signed up? Cindy?
Yes, Mr. Curtis, were you looking to speak? If we may hold for just one moment. Do we have a portable?
And this part's very important to me because I want to hear what I think especially.
Well, what I was going to suggest was, I think that the motion from the committee should actually be that you forward it to town council with your recommendation for disapproval.
We've already discussed this, and we're not prepared to do that. We have the option of denying it at the committee level and sending it for as Councilman DeSimone suggested, but thank you. It was a conversation that we've already had.
Is there a direction to staff to do something with it then?
Well, I understand that your concern is that you want it to move forward. The committee's made the motion to have the document, and you can restate your motion or someone can read it back, but I think that the motion was to deny it and that the document should live with the nonprofit and not with the town. The committee has accepted that motion.
I mean, to me, if this is a discussion, the
Well,
action's going to occur regardless. It just depends on where it occurs, correct?
Correct.
Well, if the motion then is that the town is to do nothing else with it, because, the town can't force some other agency to do this.
Well, the motion was to examine where it should live. So it's not really just dead. It's to deny us taking it in at this time, have discussions, figure out where it should live.
Okay, that was sort of my question, which was, is there direction to staff to do something at this point as a result of your motion? It was unclear to me that there was.
Oh, okay. Well, we can clear it up.
So I think what I heard you say, Councilman, is that staff is to go back to with the Housing Action Committee for the Housing Action Committee to determine within their agencies, their lead agency likely, where the document should live.
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for what you're trying to accomplish. I just don't think it's a town function.
Correct. And I agree with that.
And Ms. Becker,
Yes, ma'am.
for a matter of the record, may we have a vote, please? I did not catch that.
So we were still waiting for public comment.
Okay.
Yes. Was
you
there
ready?
anyone else who
Yes,
signed
ma'am.
up? Yes, ma'am.
So I have Sandy West.
Good morning.
Morning.
I almost always start by saying thank you for your service, and I will continue to do that. However, I am absolutely shocked. Without words, I had some prepared remarks, not imagining that this was the undressing, if you will, of staff people, the committee that's worked hard on this. And Ms. Becker, I have to correct you. And I hope that you watch the videos.
I did.
We have
And
not
I
been
also sit in the
talking in
audience.
every single meeting about getting money from the town. So I'd like that to be understood, and I hope you will go back and look, because that is not at all how we have spent our time. The issue of having workforce housing, that is workforce availability, means we also need to have workforce housing, which we also need to deal with displacement issues. When Chimney Cove happened a couple of years ago, y'all seem to remember that it was so smooth and easy. I joined the community coalition that Pastor June put together, as did others that are in this room, and it was far from that. So it's interesting, I mean, revisionistic history, I guess, is where we are, that was just easy and smooth, even though there was no plan, like everybody figured it out. I don't believe that to be the case, and I was part of that movement. It was that incident that caused me to apply to be a part of the Housing Action Committee. And I'll just say, I hope I am not wasting my time. I am the vice chair. We have a hardworking committee. It seems to me that what you want to do is squash this right here. It cannot go to town council. It won't have any other way of living in terms of a continuing conversation. The committee unanimously approved this. We have worked hard. We've worked with so many different nonprofit social organizations, and I anticipated endorsement from this committee. So all I can say is, if you don't understand the connection between, if we don't have workforce people here, housing, and deal with that, we have no community. We have no quality of life. These things are all very linked, and I know that you know that. The fact that we want to have something in place that is a smooth plan for another, which it's going to happen, another displacement. You know, Diamond Cove re-emphasized the need for us to have this plan. So I beg you to reconsider, because I'm still not even sure if this has died here, or if in fact, and I'd like to hear, I guess, a recording of what you all are voting on. Because I don't believe that this is the right thing that the town should be doing.
Well, let me ask you something, you know,
My time is
yeah, I
up,
know, but.
That's okay,
let
you're
me ask you
welcome to,
something.
you're welcome to
So
stay.
you
I do
talk about,
questions.
you worked hours, and I'm sure you have, hours and hours, and don't you think you're more qualified to own this document than the town of Hilton Head? Do you not feel more
This committee, do you
qualified?
think this committee is lasting in perpetuity? I mean, we don't have terms, limits on our terms so far. But no, I don't think it should live with the committee. I think the town needs to support it, like it supports the residents of this community and understands the need that when these kinds of things happen, I want to be a part of the town that rises up and helps people when these kinds of situations happen. And Ms. Becker, respectfully, you have obviously spent a ton of time going through every single thing, which also makes me feel like right out of the gate, we're going to find a way to squash this. I'm sorry. I have to
Well,
be
I
honest.
appreciate your comments, and I'd like to address them. You're absolutely correct, and you know me well enough to know I did. I've gone through every single document. I've sat in almost every single meeting, and when I couldn't, I watched them online. And I've read every word, and I've made sure that the town's best interest as a limited government is doing our share, and that the nonprofits who do their share are doing their jobs in that we stay out of each other's lanes. If in fact what we've heard here today is true, that our only obligation is to submit a pre-application questionnaire and then turn it over, then we will meet that obligation. I think that's simple enough. I'd like to see the questionnaire rewritten. Obviously, I made my comments with regard to that. It's not written well. It doesn't protect people. It's not in the best interest of a developer or the residents who live there in the potentially displaced community. And so, yes, I have done my homework, and we don't agree on the philosophy, that's obvious. I believe this document should go back, and the Housing Action Committee should rewrite it and have it far more tight and do what it is that was said was the objectives that I've heard repeated here today.
I thought I heard you say earlier that you wanted the town staff to get more involved.
No, I did not say I wanted the town to get more
And yet you're worried about the amount of time
involved.
town staff is spending. So that doesn't make any sense to me.
I do not want the town to be more involved.
So you want the committee to take it back
Sure,
and rewrite
document.
it, the volunteers, the 10 of us, to do that, with no staff support.
So we're getting into details of mincing words, and I'm not going to parse words here in order to get into a conflict. I do appreciate the hard work that you've done, and my philosophy is different than yours, and I think that this is the path forward for today.
Good,
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions?
Sorry.
Are there
Jack
any?
Alderman.
Check.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this issue. I'm Jack Alderman. I'm chairman of the Housing Action Committee. More importantly, I'm one of many citizens that is very concerned about this town's future without a workforce that is available, committed, trained, and that takes some work. And the town needs to be a participant in that process. In this case, the town is not being asked to lead the process, but actually to activate a process when they have information that needs to be sent along. And any other interpretation of this document that says it's going to lead to a lot of town funding, a lot more town staff time is a gross misrepresentation of what is in the document. Town staff has put a lot of excellent research and thought into the creation of this displacement plan. It's been thoroughly vetted, and smart adjustments to it have been made over several months. In this plan, the lead partners are Deep Well as lead partner, Community Foundation as the fiscal agent, and United Way is the fiduciary lead partner. The town's primary role is to keep agencies well informed. No spending by the town, and the staff people that would be working on it are already in place and already being paid. I have collaborated with all those excellent nonprofits that we just talked about, and I think their leadership, their motivation, and their accomplishments for our community are simply outstanding, and we have the right group in place to lead this effort. This is really about the quality of life for all residents of Hilton Head Island. Economic vitality and the availability of a committed workforce is critical to our quality of life for all citizens. And loss of workers in a displacement event is not only a humanitarian issue, it's also a serious threat to our economic vitality. So this plan is not some experiment in social experimentation, and it's not a big town commitment. That would take a real misreading of this document to reach that conclusion. It's simply a smart, well-coordinated way to support our workforce, which supports our economy, which supports our quality of life. Keeping our workforce is frankly the biggest issue this community will face in the coming years. And it's the biggest threat to Hilton Head Island's future vitality. This displacement plan is one important piece of the efforts we need to make to preserve our workforce. As chair of the Housing Action Committee, I respectfully ask for your full endorsement by this committee today, and then by town council, of this displacement mitigation support plan. Thank you.
You, if you have a second, your whole 3 minutes, you talked about displacement of workforce, right?
That's what this is about, yes.
Yeah, and that's one of my problems. It's just displacement. You could have displacement of assisted living or redevelopment. It's not a displacement of workforce. It's a displacement program. Across the board, correct?
What we're here to talk about today is displacement. It's part of a whole housing action plan for the
Right,
for the
but it's
town.
not, but I think everyone's caught up on this workforce housing thing in the town of Hilton Head for a couple of years, and you're trying to mold it into everything. You're trying to use the word workforce in every possibility and way and document brought before the town of Hilton Head. And I wouldn't look at displacement as a workforce displacement. I look at it as displacement. Because there's lots of displacement. There's commercial displacement. You go in and revamp an entire commercial, the mall. They just, you know how many jobs were lost in the displacement of that commercial development? So it's displacement. So we have to look at displacement, not displacement for workforce housing. Do you even know who lives in Chimney Cove?
Sure.
Do you?
Yeah.
How many of them work and how many live there? So,
I do. Do you?
no, I don't. That's why I asked the question. So, and it was a great study. And I'm all for what you're doing. I'll say it again, that's the second time, and I'll say it again, the third. I'm absolutely 100% behind what you're doing, and I think it's needed. I just don't think it needs to live in the town of Hilton Head proper. But the town will support you. And you have the forces to enforce it better than we have the forces to enforce it.
We do not have any enforcement capability.
Well, you've got
in
10
the Housing
members,
Action
10
Committee.
members that voted 10-0 to push this forward.
Right.
And you're hard-working people that understand it more than we understand it, because you've done all the study and all the work. Maybe that kind of force needs to be put in place with the assistance of the town, but I don't think it needs to be a town function. That's all I'm saying. I think you're doing great work, and I appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm 100% behind you.
We think that this document is an important piece of the total housing plan, and town's only role is really to activate it when it hears of a displacement event.
Well, then I think this should be rewritten, because this document that we received today to make a motion and vote on is not written that way. So if you want to rewrite it in a way where, just as you said, in about 4 words, I don't think you'll have a problem with the town getting behind it.
I think those are the words that are in the document. Thank you.
Well, they're not. They may be in there, but there's a bunch of others, and that's what kills the program.
Are there any other folks who are signed up to speak?
Mr. Williams? That's all for this.
Is that it? Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Well, sure. Of course you may.
I'll try to do some bargaining on the behalf of staff here. Because I listened to the discussion. I'm not sure that there's a clear direction to staff as to what to bring back, okay?
I think that's because we didn't ask them necessarily to bring something back. We gave them a charge that
Well-
if the committee wants to rewrite it, and I think
Well, I think that
Councilman
what I'm hearing
Dismas-
from Mr. Decimone is bring back something that clearly separates the town's responsibility in this process, okay? And I'm not quite sure what the notes of Mr. Loniger says, but I want to make sure that they match up, okay? Because I think Mr. Decimone said that he's in support of a program. He just does not want the town to be in charge of the program. And I think there's a little confusion about the Housing Action Committee as well, because that is a committee that was appointed by the town, okay? So if we're saying you should do it, and then a committee that's appointed by the town, then we're really saying that the town should do it. So all I'm suggesting here is that we have just a short conversation between Mr. Loniger and the committee as to what exactly we're looking for to come back so that it can be supported. That's it. Thank you.
Well taken, yep, absolutely. And I think it was, if we read back the motion, I think it's clear. Maybe if it's not, we'll clear it up.
May you clear that motion up, please?
Do you have it?
So, deny adopting the document. Adopting the document, sending it to committee for further discussion and work with the Housing Action Committee on where the document should live.
Right, so we're gonna send it back to the committee, the committee being the housing committee, and have them rewrite it, which I just discussed with Mr. Alderman. And he made it clear that it's just a document that we need to include. And if we can get that document that we need to include to give to the applicant, then I think, and from my point of view, I absolutely support that. But having it managed and living in the town of Hilton Head, the town of Hilton Head, is what I'm saying is not in that motion. So, you understand what I'm saying?
You want the entire, I want to make sure we're talking about the entirety of the displacement mitigation plan, not just the voluntary questionnaire. I think maybe I'm confused.
The town doesn't have to have the master document for the mitigation plan.
The whole thing, okay, that's what I'll make sure.
A good example, before, there was someone who mentioned in the case of a fire which may displace someone. When the fire and rescue are leaving, we generally get reports, and if there's a home that's no longer inhabitable, Red Cross is notified, right? So that's a notification. If through this revamped questionnaire, if it were to be filled out, the appropriate agency would be given the questionnaire. And then all the rest belongs with the lead agency, which has been identified as Deepwell. And they own it from there. That's the separation of responsibilities and duties. And that's what everyone has said. But as you've mentioned, Councilman, that's not what this document says. And yes, I've read it thoroughly.
And I'm still a little confused. I mean, I'll look at you two that spoke. What is it that you want the town to be involved with that is so important that it can't be implemented without the town being involved in it? Because basically a questionnaire that goes in a development agreement.
And I think you hear a lot of those answers through those meetings.
Can one of you answer that? Why is it essential that the town, from your point of view?
Would you like us to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely, if you could, yeah. I'm just curious.
The document says, once a potential displacement event is identified, the town will activate the community response team. Often the town is the first to hear of a displacement event.
Correct.
They activate the displacement team, the response team, and it goes on from there. That's the town's responsibility here is to activate the team. And in many cases, we'll know that before others in the community would know it. And the earlier those agencies can be put to work.
And some of that's happening now, like she said about the fire department.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also says that there's anecdotal information gathered, et cetera. So that's something that is built into this as well. So when that anecdotal information is gathered, who are they giving it to? Who's responsible for gathering it? There's a lot of open-ended questions, and I think that the approach that's being taken by the motion that's been made and accepted with a second is a good one to separate the roles and responsibilities moving forward. And I'm going to call the question and ask for the vote. All in favor?
Excuse me, 1 second. So if I'm understanding, just for clarity, that what is being requested is that a document, if there is one, does not have the town logo on it. It is a document of Deepwell, both the document itself and any voluntary questionnaire, that it is not with the town of Hilton Head seal. Is that what I'm understanding as what is requested within this motion, that it is to be worked on as a document with Housing Action Committee, but that it is not something that would be adopted by the town of Hilton Head Island? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've
And
called
if
the
I could just
question.
make one last comment.
I've called the question, thank you.
Want to hear from her?
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah,
We
please.
do have
I'm
a
sorry.
request to hear from
Go
you,
ahead.
if you'd like to make your comment.
Okay.
Sorry. We're just an hour and 20 minutes into this. All right, all in favor of the motion that has been made, please raise your right hand. On those opposed? Thank you. So the motion passes 2-1. And so the next item on our agenda for this morning is B, under new business, consideration of an ordinance to authorize the execution and delivery of an easement for ingress and egress to Cordillo Courts and the hedges encumbering real property located at 104 Cordillo Parkway, owned by the town of Hilton Head Island. And Sean Cullen is here to make that presentation to us.
Good morning, Chair and committee members and other council members in the crowd here. I'll try to be relatively brief. This is really cleaning up some legal documents for clarity, both for the town and the hedges and Cordillo Court. So town acquired property from Sea Cabin Rackets in 2002. Sea Cabin 1 is Cordillo Court, Sea Cabin 2 is the hedges. When the town acquired the parcel with the courts on it, and I'm gonna put up a map real quick, so just, it'll help. So you can see what was two developments, two condominium developments, Cordillo Courts and the hedges. The town acquired this property here, about 1.5 acres that has 4 tennis courts on it. And the access to both Cordillo Courts and the hedges runs through the town-owned property. You pull in the driveway, you could go right, you can go left, or you can go straight through. But there's no clear delineation on previous plats or legal recordings that, that provide clarity on that easement. So the first item on the agenda today is an ordinance to create that legal document and easement for access to both the Cordillo Courts and the hedges. I have James Ackerman in the crowd representing Cordillo Courts, and I've been working with him for a number of years actually to get this kind of cleaned up. So I'm happy to do whatever else you need, or give you whatever other information you need to move this on with a recommendation for approval, but that's, I know for time's sake, I'll just stop there.
Okay. Are there any questions by any of our committee members? Steve? Any of our other councilmen, women in the audience? And is there a motion?
Move approval.
Are there any public comments with regard to this recommendation?
The only person that I had was Mr. Williams.
No,
Okay.
you're good,
Thank
okay. Then all in favor? Opposed? And it passes unanimously. And letter C, consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of an agreement with Cordillo Courts and the hedges regarding signs on real property owned and located at 104 Cordillo Parkway by the town of Hilton Head Island. And again, Sean, thank you so much for the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. This one runs in parallel with the access easement, which requires an ordinance of town council. This is a sign agreement. As you can see, the main access off Cordillo is on the town property. So Cordillo and certainly the hedges don't have sort of any recognition on their property at the interface there of Cordillo Courts and the driveway. And so this second item is an agreement to manage and maintain a sign on town property, working with Cordillo Courts and the hedges so that there's that signage on Cordillo Parkway. The town is responsible for the sign, for sign maintenance and upkeep and repair. And that if anything changes with the sign design, that we provide 30 days written notice to both the hedges and Cordillo Courts. And if there's no objection, we can move forward with that. But it's really just providing that That sign has been there for a number of years, clarity on the agreement with both those communities. So happy to answer any other questions you have at this time.
Any questions from the committee? And did-
Approval.
Any questions from anyone who is in attendance? No? Okay. And all in favor? Opposed?
Oh, go ahead.
Was there not?
I just have one more comment after you're done. I want to say as this moves forward to town council, we'll move the ordinance forward for first reading. And then the sign agreement, because it's a resolution, will come forward when the ordinance has second reading. And then we'll close both of those items out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And consideration of an ordinance to amend Title 16 of the Municipal Code, the Land Management Ordinance, to amend the procedures of development plan reviews and major subdivision plan reviews to include the following sections: 16.2.101, 16.2.102, and 16.2.103. And Missy Lewick, who's our Director of Planning, is making that presentation, and she'll be with us in a moment.
Yeah, my apologies. They probably thought I was going to go a little longer with these two items, but we'll grab them
That's okay.
and bring them in. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning again. So now I am here to talk to you about an amendment to the Land Management Ordinance. This is part of our Land Management Ordinance Amendment Plan, which is included in our Strategic Action Plan as part of the first strategy, which is to establish a growth management strategy. And as you're well aware, the LMO Amendments project is broken into two parts: the priority amendments and the full code overhaul. The priority amendments aim to address pressing community development issues with the best short-term solution while minimizing unintended outcomes. We discussed a number of priority amendments in our September workshop of council. One of those was related to advance notice of major subdivisions and major development plans. It was discussed that we should require a hearing of the Planning Commission for major development plans and major subdivisions, as well as requiring advance notice and mailing to beyond the standard 350 feet, require notice of the application be posted on site, require a pre-application meeting instead of encourage it, and to allow the LMO official to advance minor development plans to the Planning Commission when the property is adjacent to residential. That is the amendment that has been put together. It is an improvement to a process. So this is really a procedural change in how we review and approve major development plans and major subdivisions. It is codifying a practice that we have had in place for about a year and a half, where we have been putting on our Planning Commission agendas as a staff report major development plans and major subdivisions, and our Planning Commission has been hearing them. But what has not been in place is all of that notice, advance notice requirements, which is what this particular amendment does. So the summary of what the amendment does here is what we talked about back in September at that workshop. It mandates the pre-application meetings. It requires the Planning Commission to review major subdivisions, major development plans, and those minor development plans that are adjacent to or across the street from residential uses. It requires advance notice in 3 categories. 1, that there is notice published in the newspaper. 2, that there is mailed notice to properties within 500 feet of the subject property, as well as the public notice sign posted on the property. And that the Planning Commission hold a hearing, public hearing for review of these activities. There's an analysis table that's included in the memo that really walks through how the code changes do exactly what I just identified. It identifies an M, which stands for mandatory for the pre-application requirement. There's language here that identifies the change to the major subdivision requirement, that application is forwarded to the Planning Commission for review. And the same language is for the major development plans. It identifies here again in the code those notice requirements, both in published notice, mailed notice, and posted notice. And as all text amendments, they're required to meet some text amendment review standards. Those standards are part of 16.2.103B3 within the code. In accordance with the comprehensive plan, required by changed conditions, addresses a demonstrated community need, is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning district within the ordinance, would result in a logical and orderly development, and would not result in significantly adverse impacts on the natural environment. We've answered all of those text amendment review criteria here in the staff report. Most importantly, I think this is consistent with the comprehensive plan core value goal 1, to foster a planning process that's inclusive, collaborative, ongoing, and responsive to changing circumstances and stakeholder priorities, responds to changing conditions by improving transparency and community involvement in the development review process. It addresses a demonstrated community need by ensuring residents are better informed about proposed developments and have more opportunities for engagement. It upholds the intent of zoning regulations by promoting compatibility among land users and fostering orderly development. Creates a more logical and structured review process, improving oversight and stakeholder involvement by requiring pre-application meetings, expanded public notice, and additional planning commission public hearings, and minimizes potential adverse impacts on the environment and surrounding neighborhoods through transparent review of certain subdivision and development plan review applications. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and made a recommendation to Town Council. They had 2 small changes that have been incorporated in the amendment before you today. One was a mandatory hearing, change that from a mandatory hearing to a mandatory public hearing at the Planning Commission, and then replace what was worded as advisory body to Planning Commission within the text. And this is, again, before you as a committee, before it moves on to Town Council. The code also identifies Town Council's role in text amendment review and consideration that's outlined here. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
My understanding here is that these applications historically needed approval only by the LMO official.
That's correct.
And that as a result of the situation a few years ago in Jonesville, where an official had approved some of the projects many years previously, there was a total lack of awareness on the part of most of the people in the community of the proposed development. And that this is intended as a means of making known to the community a prospective development. But the decision still remains with the LMO official, not by the Planning Commission or any other group. It's just that now there is a procedure to make sure the public is aware of proposed developments.
You're absolutely correct, yes. The criteria for consideration for major development plans, major subdivisions is still the land management ordinance. And yes, the LMO official is still the administrator of the approving body of those particular applications in conformance with the land management ordinance. And yes, the public hearing component of that offers transparency to those within 500 feet of that proposed development. And so both the Planning Commission and the public are invited to learn more about the project and understand how it meets the land management ordinance, yes.
On that basis, I would move approval.
Are there any comments from our other 2 councilmen and councilwomen in the room today? I am not politically correct. Let's just say that.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Alfred asked my question, one of the questions that I had, but the other one has to do with the text amendment, review and decision making process, and that it says that the town council's, well, first of all, it says that proposed changes or departures from the text amendment that is different than what was reviewed by the planning commission shall be first submitted to the planning commission for review and recommendation. So I'm just trying to apply what's on here to what happened with Blue Hour. It got a little confusing because there were lots of changes. So what this is saying is moving forward, if someone comes to the planning commission and then they want to make changes, it will not move forward to town council until it has been reviewed by the planning commission again. So that takes a step out of, it feels like it takes a step out of the process, which is a good thing.
Are there any comments by either Missy or Sean or with regard to that question or comment? Just so we're clear.
I apologize. Chet was asking me a
Oh, no
question
problem.
while you were talking. So
No problem.
That's okay. There's plenty of people in the room who can help out.
I'll just restate it. I'm just trying to apply what's in this section to what happened with Blue Hour. And so when people come and present in front of the planning commission, if after the fact there are changes that they are making, that it should not go to town council and it should go straight back to the planning commission for review.
So this is a little bit different. So the Blue Hour request was an actual text amendment to the code, which is an ordinance that has a public hearing at the Planning Commission and is also approved by Town Council. This is just a public hearing step where the major subdivision, major development plan, and minor development plans that meet this criteria have an application process that's outlined within the code. And this public hearing step would just be that transparency step. The LMO official still would approve those applications administratively when it meets the land management ordinance. So typically in a development review process, there's the first submittal, it gets reviewed by staff. There's the lengthy plan corrections report of what they need to do to amend their plans to bring it into conformance with the code. That would continue to happen. There would just be along that review period, they would come to the planning commission and there would be transparency in a hearing where those neighboring property owners could come to a meeting and learn more about this development that is planned. But then the approval authority would still be the LMO official. Did I answer your question?
No, well, I'm still confused, so I apologize. Because this section talks about the involvement of the town council. And the town council, you know, as you go down, it says the town council's decision shall be one of the following, adopting an ordinance or a resolution. So that's where I had my question regarding changes to the text amendment and when it comes to town council.
Okay, so yes, if there was changes to this text that were to be made after the Planning Commission's public hearing, which it already had. So if there were changes, we need to change a word or two, then yes, it would go back as a remand to Planning Commission, correct?
So my analogy to Blue Hour is this is strictly about this topic and not about text amendments in general.
This is correct. This town council review and decision is part of how all text amendments are reviewed in that approval process that's outlined within the code.
May I ask, and let's see if I can help with the question, because I think, Melinda, I understand what you're asking.
Yes.
And if I get it wrong, then just let me know and we'll move on. But what seemed to have happened during Blue Hour, and it's happened maybe at other times too, and so not to just hang it there, but that there were substantial changes. And I think it's the level of changes that take place and at what point does that get remanded back for clarification and change prior to it coming to town council for a vote. And that, I think, was a big question mark in this last go around on, so I'm not sure, first Melinda, did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Thank you for making it clear.
So I'm not sure if I clarified the question at all, and I see Curtis, our Coltrane, is standing, and I see also that you're having a little bit of difficulty today, so if you would like to ask the question from back there, you certainly, please do.
Is this on?
Yeah.
It is? Okay. Blue Hour was not typical. Blue Hour was heard by the Planning Commission at a public hearing, and the Planning Commission voted to advance it with a recommendation for denial.
Correct.
Before it got to town council, the applicant itself proposed changes to the ordinance, which were then reviewed by town council, and the whole matter was sent back to the Planning Commission. Typically what happens is that the Planning Commission hears a matter and advances an ordinance to council with whatever its recommendation might be. At the discussion between and amongst council, perhaps with the applicant, some change is proposed there, not while it doesn't get rewritten after the Planning Commission's heard it. The way the statute is written, I mean, unless you're literally talking about things like correcting typos or correcting grammatical changes, it has to go back. But Blue Hour was not a typical thing where there were material changes to what was proposed made by the applicant in between the Planning Commission's decision and its discussion before council.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. We appreciate it. So, question? Okay, and two things. Missy, two things on this. Oh, Councilman Brown, sorry. I got off track.
When I'm done, if we could ask Ms. Lewick to define major subdivision, minor subdivision. I just think for the benefit of the public, that's not in the packet as far as the definitions are concerned. I think people need to know what we're talking about as far as what will apply. And secondly, obviously we just had a little confusion. One of my concerns is that once this is approved, that John Q. Public really understands what's going to happen. I don't want to give off any false indication that when an applicant makes an application and it comes to the Planning Commission, that somehow the Planning Commission will have some say, okay? I think sometimes we believe in here what we want to believe in here, but the LMO official is still going to be the person making the decision. So as those items come forth, typically in an agenda item, it just lists out a public hearing and the application code along with it, and it's very generic in my opinion. I think as we go through this process and we start to try it on, we need to be very deliberate with our agendas to make sure that the public knows that this is for transparency and public knowledge, not that they're going to weigh in on a decision. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to have sort of misconception of what we're trying to do here. This is a transparency effort more than anything else.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any questions or comments from anyone else? Yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. I'm Chester Williams. I still have one concern about the discrepancy between the table that's in 16.2.101 and the provisions of, what is this? 16.2.103 4C. Where my office is over on Executive Park Road, if I wanted to reconfigure the parking lot or something, well, I got to get a minor development plan approval. And I come in, I look at the chart here, minor development plan. Okay, maybe I should have a pre-application conference. The official is the one who makes the decision. The only time the Planning Commission gets involved is if there's an appeal. Mr. Coltrane wants to make some changes to his parking lot where his office is. Needs to get a minor development plan. Well, he comes down here and he looks at the same thing and says, okay, I have to go to the official. But when you read the provisions of, again, 16.2.103, ABC, G4C2, a minor development plan review when adjacent to or across the street from a residential use shall be reviewed by the planning commission in the same manner as a major development plan review. Well, there's a residential use across the street from where Mr. Coltrane's office is, but nowhere is that mentioned in the chart. And the chart, it says, identifies those applications that require a hearing. Well, Mr. Coltrane's application requires a hearing, but it's not identified as that in the chart. It's a technical issue. I think it implements what the Planning Commission has recommended to you. I don't think that needs to go back to the Planning Commission, but it's easy to fix the chart so that it complies with the text. And if it does have to go back to the Planning Commission, better to do it right than to do it fast. And for Mr. Brown's comments, he's exactly right there. This is, the official is the one who makes the decision. And it doesn't, and these sorts of things, these development plans, they're ministerial decisions. You give the town staff everything that's required for a development plan review approval, they gotta give you your permit. It's not a popularity contest. It's not a beauty contest. It doesn't matter what the neighbors say as a practical effect. If you meet the requirements, you get your permit. Transparency, that's right. Everybody knows it's coming, but it's like the maiden tied onto the railroad tracks. The train's coming, you know it's coming, and nothing you can do about it if you meet all the requirements. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the room want to speak to this? All right. Missy, I had two quick questions or comments, whatever they are, for you on this. It has a lot to do, unless something has changed. I see there's a lot of talking. Is there anything else that you want to update us on with regard to? Okay. So, yes, the LMO official remains the one, and yes, the criteria of the LMO has to be met. That's all true. The transparency issue is critical. We've had this issue with regard to transparency on this island for as long as I've been involved, so since 2014. And there was no transparency, and in fact, impacted all of us in many ways. So we're trying to clean that up and try to make it more resident-friendly. But I believe in all the discussions as we were having them, the idea of it just coming forth through Planning Commission and them just kind of being the holder of the public hearing, that there was, at least in my mind, I thought, an intent to have Public Planning Commission make recommendations, useful recommendations with regard to site plan, et cetera, so that we could begin to develop a more community-based project, something without all the straight lines, more of a residential feel. Did I miss something in that? Are those recommendations still being asked of the Planning Commission to submit when they review a project?
So-
Or are they just the holder of the public hearing?
They're holding a public hearing. We discussed whether or not the Planning Commission should have some additional criteria and make a recommendation. However, the review criteria is the land management ordinance, not another set of criteria requirements. And so after discussion, both with our legal team, including the town attorney, unless we were going to rewrite it such that the Planning Commission is the decision-making authority, which they don't have the capacity to do that for all of our development projects. Or they would retain that that's an administrative function. And so, yes, they will consider it. And I'll just say that we've been taking these major developments to the Planning Commission for review, and there's generally healthy discussion among the Planning Commission. A lot of those comments and feedback is incorporated into the final plans. So it does result in better site plan, in more thoughtful development planning on the island, and that would continue. I think that transparency component is critical to what this is achieving. But no, it does not introduce another set of criteria and a layer of approval step, but that discussion and input at the Planning Commission hearing, both the developer and town staff who is reviewing it will hear that discussion and be able to incorporate some of those comments and feedback into the final development plan.
I think that depth of conversation is the important piece of this,
Correct.
which, we're trying to resolve without making it an official step and an official stamp of approval along the way. I hear all of that, and those are all really good things. I did want to mention, though, I've sat through a lot of those meetings, and some of that conversation has happened, sometimes really great and sometimes not. And after speaking to a couple of members of the commission, they seemed to express to me an interest in having a workshop, educational workshop, informing them about really what it is what it is that they can say, what input they're being asked to give. And I think with a little bit of that type of information, that process will work out a lot better. Residents will be heard, their thoughtful insights and consideration can be provided back to the planning department and to the official so that we get better products in the end. And that's what this is all for. This is ultimately the process of getting to a better community project. So those are just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Along with that, I think that we can call the vote, and all in favor. Did you moved, you seconded. All in favor? Perfect. It's a 3-0 approval, and I believe that ends our agenda, other than a moment for anyone else who may be here who wanted to give a public comment not related to agenda items. And seeing none, we're adjourned.